Alrighty, good evening. I'm going to call to order the Wilmington School Committee meeting of Wednesday, September 26th. Could all rise and join me in saying our Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Tristan, for the minutes, if you could just show that all members are present with the exception of Mr. Talbot. Thank you. Welcome. Welcome, welcome. We actually have an audience tonight. That's kind of nice. All righty. Our first item of business is under our consent agenda items. And we've got approval of minutes of August 15th, which was our workshop with MASC on governments. And we also have some minutes from our most recent regular meeting for September 12th. And I just wanted to make sure committee members received the updated version. Mr. Ragsdale caught a couple of adjustments before this was put out publicly. Okay, so could I ask for a motion to approve the minutes from August 15th and also September 12th? Mrs. Bryson, seconded. Mrs. Burns, thank you. All those in favor? That would be unanimous. Thank you. Okay, and then we've got a donation from Wilmington Pediatrics to Wilmington High School for extracurricular activities in the amount of $500, and I did see a nice letter of attachment. Anything to add, Dr. Brand, on that?
No, always with much appreciation, though. Thank you for the donation.
Great, thank you. Could I have a motion to accept the donation of $500 by Wilmington Pediatrics to Wilmington High School for extracurricular activities? Mr. Bjork, thank you. Mrs. Newhouse for the second, thank you. All those in favor? That looks like unanimous to me. All right, and we have a handful of warrants. We have warrants G404, G405, R207, R208. Let's take that as a section. Can I have a motion to approve those minutes, please? Mr. Bjork, seconded by Mrs. Bryson. All those in favor? That looks unanimous. Thank you. And then we have L11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16. We have FS05, FS06. Let's take those as a grouping. Mrs. Bryson, thank you. Mr. Bjork, second. All those in favor? That's unanimous. And then we've got a couple of payroll warrants. We've got week ending September 12th and payroll of September 26th. Can I have a motion to approve the payroll? Mrs. Bryson and Mrs. Burns, second. Thank you. All those in favor? Great. I feel like a bit like an auctioneer this evening. See how fast we can get through this. All right, next warrant, we've got CB01. Can I have a motion to approve CB01, please? Mrs. Bryson, seconded by Mr. Ragsdale. All those in approval? And we've got a couple abstentions, Mr. Bjork and Mrs. Burns. And then we've got the carry forward warrants, 04 and 05. A motion to approve those, please. Mrs. Burns, motion seconded by Mrs. Bryson. All those in favor? Thank you. And then our last grouping, we have SPED 04, 05, and 06. Can I have a motion to approve those three, please? Mr. Ragsdale, motion. Mrs. Burns, second. All those in favor? Mrs. Bryson, thank you. That's what I get for going fast, right? Okay, thank you. We've got 3 in favor and 3 abstentions. All right, next item up is our superintendent's report. Dr. Brand.
Thank you very much, and good evening, everyone. A few items of note to share with the community and the committee this evening. First off, within your packet, you'll note a memo entitled Athletics Department Agenda Follow-Up. You will recall that at our last meeting, our Director of Athletics, Mr. Tim Alberts, provided information that was more than just a presentation as it related to the consideration of the co-op opportunity with the swim program, but on a larger level, information around the athletic department as a whole. I provide for you in this memo three things that I'm calling as proposals as a continuation of that conversation and presentation that was brought before you at the last meeting. The three, as you can see in the memo, the three proposals First off, a review of the current additional costs associated with athletic activities. It seems quite clear that maybe not in all, but in a number of activities, there are additional costs that students and families respectively do have to put forth in order to participate, and it seems timely and appropriate to get a better sense on that. And so the proposal here is to work closely with Tim over the course of the 3 sports seasons to do just that and to gather that information, so we have a little bit better sense of what those costs might look like. The second proposal is to develop guidelines regarding the addition or elimination of a sport activity. We obviously have a whole host of sports under the umbrella of the high school and the Department of Athletics here in Wilmington Public Schools. And from time to time, there very well could be a emerging need to consider adding or, in some cases, perhaps eliminating a sport. And so, as was noted last time we met, we don't currently as a district have guidelines in place right now for either adding or eliminating a sport, and so that seems also very appropriate to pursue. And then the third, a little bit broader and outside of just athletics, but seems pertinent to the conversation last week, is to start to get a better sense of other school-related fees throughout the district. Collectively, this will all take some time, but I do propose, with your support and your will, that I would come back to you in the spring with a better sense of all of these things and the data collected. So on that particular note, maybe I'll just pause and just ask if there are any questions or follow-up comments or concerns.
Thank you. I just want to thank you for tackling this, and Mr. Albus for tackling this piece, because I think it is such an important aspect to what we offer our students in this community, and I just wanted to thank you, and I look forward to hearing your report at the end of the year.
Mrs. President, question about the development of guidelines regarding adding or eliminating a sport. Do we have to approve that? Is that, when that comes back, a set of guidelines, does that come back to us?
So a great question. So the term guidelines at this juncture would be the proposal, not identifying a school committee policy. However, certainly that could be for further discussion if you wanted to. The thought here is guidelines for administration to consider, but through conversation, perhaps you may, as a governing body, want to consider something more. But at this juncture, more of administrative. I might just add that regardless of the direction that this goes, I do see this very much, obviously, an integral part of the budgetary process. And so, if not for anything else, is thinking ahead for the following year. I think it should appropriately be captured in the budget. So, is that all right for now?
Yeah, absolutely, thanks.
Okay. Just a couple of other items to note. MCAS, it is quickly upon us. This is a big week across the state as it relates to the Department of Education's release of the data, and I want to make the committee and the community aware of this. This is a new accountability system that is in place. It's designed ultimately at the core on how to measure a district and a school. It's the next generation MCAS. The results will become public, as we understand it, tomorrow across the state. Districts are expected to receive paper copies of individual student reports at the end of this week. There is some work, as no doubt you might understand and expect, involved in collating all of those reports, separating them, and then getting them off to the respective schools and prepare the mailing. So within probably the next week and a half to 2 weeks, I would suggest we should be at a place where families will start to receive those individual reports. And work certainly has begun already with the administration having the opportunity to start to begin a review of that data. And it would be my intention and proposal to the committee and to the chair to have Dr. Regan bring forward what is an annual report on the MCAS results and analysis, probably what's looking to be at the November 14th meeting. These results are a little bit later than typical, and it's a new system, as mentioned, and so it's going to take a little bit more time to try and make sense of it and understand pertinent information to share, but I did want the community to know about that. And finally, if I may, just a plug for the upcoming parent community forums. On Monday, October the 1st, coming up unbelievably as it is, but it is October, 9:30 to 11 in the morning at the Woburn Street School. And then next week also, Wednesday, October the 3rd, right here at the Wilmington High School from 6:30 until 8. Both of these are community forums that are open, and anyone in the community is welcome to attend. You do not need children in the school system, and I'd love the opportunity to meet you and continue my listening journey as it expands into the community to understand what's on people's minds as it relates to the Wilmington Public Schools. And with that, that's everything.
Great,
Thank you.
thank you very much for your report, Dr. Brands. Okay, next up, under old business, we have a second reading of our school committee operating protocols. As you might remember from our last meeting, Mrs. Bryson and Mr. Ragsdale were very kind in presenting a first draft of possible protocols for our review. We had a pretty good discussion that night and had some changes and suggested additions. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Mrs. Bryson and Mr. Ragsdale. They are presenting a second reading with those changes, and we can have further discussion if needed.
Okay, so the protocols are largely the same, but there were some important decisions made. So I'm just going to point out and highlight the changes that were made, just so everyone can see where they were. So on the first page, under the third bullet, under the roles, so there was the addition of the phrase "to make decisions" after the school committee as a whole has authority, just to kind of clarify a little bit what kind of authority we're talking about. But that was the only change made in the roles section. Under the communication section, in the first bullet point, the first bullet was reworked. There was a section before that had talked about media inquiries, and essentially that the chair would be the person to speak to the media. So that has been reworked to say that inquiries that require a response on behalf of the school committee will be forwarded to the chairperson, to make it clear that there is not an objection with individual members of the committee speaking to the media. But official responses from the school committee, we want those coming from the chair. The second bullet point was also reworked a little bit as far as the, before it had talked about that requests and information to the superintendent would be channeled through the chair. That's been changed to say that the members will copy the chairperson on any communication to the superintendent, so that members can communicate independently to the superintendent any questions that they have, but that will still make sure that the chair is aware of this line of communication so that we're all equally informed. And that was all the changes on the first page. And on the second page, in the first bullet point, there was a revision at the end. Used to say that items not in the agenda will not be raised, and that's been changed to not be discussed, because they may be raised for the purpose of putting them on a future agenda, but we simply won't discuss them at that particular meeting. The bullet point after that, the second bullet point, the first sentence was added, so it previously started by just discussing what the agendas will be guided by, and this just establishes who is creating the agendas. The chair and the superintendent will be doing that. Under the fourth bullet point, we changed the phrasing of are not public meetings to public hearings to clarify that it's not a public hearing where the public participates necessarily. And at the end of that bullet point, we added at the discretion of the chairperson for coming after the public comment portion of the meeting. And I believe that those were all the changes that we made. Most of it is still the same, but we thought that these changes were at least substantial enough that we wanted to treat this as a second reading and then do the approval at the next meeting, if no one has objections to that.
Any comments or questions on the second reading?
Just well done. That's all I'd like to share. Thank you.
Mrs. Burns. The only thing that I would add, and I'm sure it was just as this continues to be a draft, is adding in the place for us to sign it.
Sorry,
Yeah, which
which we had.
Which
Yeah,
we
we'll
had,
add that
right,
back, yep.
exactly. So I figured it was just this is a draft. Okay. Well, if there's no further comments or questions on the second reading, then I'll ask for a motion to approve the second reading of the Wilmington School Committee operating protocols. Motion made by Mr. Bjork, thank you. Seconded by Mrs. Burns, thank you. All those in favor of approving the second reading? That would be unanimous. Thanks, folks. We'll look forward to seeing that on our next agenda. Okay, moving on to new business. Our first item is something I'm excited to hear about, and that's our walking school bus program from the school year 2018-2019. And I believe we're going to have a little presentation here. Always happy to have you.
Good evening, everybody.
Good evening.
So thank you again for inviting us back to sort of share with you an update of our walking school bus program, which we would currently like to say that's been a great success. We have currently done 3 walking school bus events at the Woburn Street School. Last spring in June, we took on and did the walking school bus at the Shawshene Elementary School, which I think the children enjoyed. I think your little daughter was with us as well on that particular walk to school. We've been in touch with Shawshene again, and we are going to do a second walking school bus with them on October 10th. And next Wednesday at the Woburn Street School, we'll do our fall walking school bus. Currently at the Woburn Street School, as of this afternoon when I left school, there's 43 students that will participate with us next Wednesday morning. We've invited 3 bus loads of children to participate. We've been keeping track so that we're sharing it, so that we're making sure that we offer it to all the school buses that ride to and from the Woburn Street School, and then eventually at the Shawshene School. And our intent is in the spring to expand the program again to the west and the north, either both or one, definitely. We have to still meet with Ms. McMiniman and Mr. Shaw to sort of review the process with them and get their buy-in. And I think that fortunately we've had the children at the Woburn Street School going into the north, so I think they'll be more familiar with it, but certainly we'll have had some of the children at the Shawshene who are now currently at the west. So I think it will just be continuing to expand so that it will end up, we'll have quite a few in the fall and the spring, essentially, at as many of the schools as we can.
It is getting more and more popular.
It is. The kids are really loving it.
Yes.
And I think the process, which Officer Moon has been so gracious to sort of work with us to coordinate, having the drop-off and then the walk from that area has been so great. The children, the teachers, the mornings of the activity or the event, everyone is just
The
happy.
kids are slightly wound up when they get into school.
And the really cute.
I have nothing to do with it.
And the really cute thing is that they're also, they have their backpacks, so they're having to work a little bit of their muscular endurance process as well. So it's just been really exciting. So again, we thank you for allowing us the opportunity to do the program and to continue to grow it in the district. Any questions? Thoughts?
I'd just say this is a great program. I'm glad you guys have kept this up. Any plans for the high school?
Well, that I was actually at my School Wellness Advisory Council meeting this afternoon, and we're beginning to think of things that we might be able to do across the district. I would really like to potentially look at having a Wilmington walk to school day. I don't know whether that might be something we could entertain, but where we do it on a scheduled day across the district, maybe not the full distance for all the students, but maybe, I don't know, half mile through, I don't know. We'll have to consider
Something to consider.
something to think about.
How many Brian Moons do we have?
I know that's the
Many as
situation.
you need.
I didn't know if that's true. But yes, so we're really excited, and next week and the following week doing the program both at Woburn Street and Shawshene again, so. The permission slips went out to the children on buses 8 and 16 today for the Shawshene School, so we should be receiving some of that information or permission slips back from the parents, within the next week, so. That's all I have.
Very cool. Thank you. We are excited about this program, and I hope you continue to post pictures.
Aren't they wonderful?
They're really cute to see.
I love it. Thank you. We will.
Mr. Bjork.
I'm sorry, just real quick.
Yes.
We've heard about this several times, but people that are viewing may not. Can you just real quickly tell us
Sure,
what
give it-
it is?
Absolutely. So the children receive a permission slip from their school, and they bring that home with their parents and review it. And essentially, the permission slip comes back. The children get onto their bus at their school bus stop every morning on the day of the event. And from there, they will be then dropped off at a specific site where we have selected. And from there, we then walk the distance to school. In some cases, we have, for at Woburn Street, we'll have children who may not necessarily be doing the walking bus, so they would get off at school, and then we would continue the route. There's really little to no disruption in the process, so if the children aren't participating, it's not an issue. And we have currently done it both ways. We've done where we've dropped off at the north and then had the children who are going to be attending the Woburn Street get to the drop-off site, which is just less than a half a mile from the Woburn Street School and a half a mile from the Shawshene Elementary School.
It's the corner of Carolyn and Marsha.
Behind the school. So we pretty much walk that roadway and come up through the back pedway. And then last spring, we walked from
Cushing Drive.
Cushing Drive.
Off of Shawshene.
Off of Shawshene, and stayed right on the sidewalks. And it was great. We had lots of great people tooting at us, and we had the bus drivers from all around the district even waving. So it was, the children loved it, as well as I do, obviously.
Obviously.
That's great.
So,
Wonderful.
All
Thank you
right.
for your time.
Well,
and
thank
for
you.
sharing. Oh, Mr. Ragsdale.
The only question left is, when do we get the walking school committee program?
oh, well, you are welcome to join anytime. I can, absolutely. We'd love it. So I can send the dates and time to Dr. Brand, and then we can sort of share that out. I know next Wednesday morning we'll be congregating at 7:35-ish at Marsha and Carolyn for the Woburn Street bus. And then the following Wednesday morning on October 10th, we will sort of be at the Cushing Drive, give or take 8:35-ish.
Yeah.
And then we'll walk from there to the school. So all are welcome. And Brian, Officer Moon brings us these amazing fluorescent
Traffic vests.
traffic vests, so you can see us from a good distance away. So we are all wonderfully good.
Awesome.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Well, thank you again.
Thank you.
All right. Have a good evening, everyone. Thank
Thank you, you too. Okay, under new business, we have our next item, which is our delegate to MASC's annual convention. I will preface that by explaining for the audience that MASC stands for Massachusetts Association of School Committees. They hold their annual joint conference with MASS, which is the superintendent side of things, down on the Cape every November. A lot of professional development opportunities for both school committee members and superintendents, a lot of current trends, great opportunity to talk about what's the latest and greatest in public education. And as part of that, every year they hold a annual general meeting for all members. They ask the participating districts to appoint one representative to represent Wilmington or that town at the convention. So we're at the point where we need to nominate our member. And I guess I'll preface it by saying who's planning on being there for the meeting, which is on Friday the 9th, I believe, November 9th? Okay. Anybody interested in raising their hand? Mrs. Burns?
I am raising my hand to say that I will be there.
Okay,
I've done
great.
it for several years, but I am more than happy to share the wealth in that piece.
Excellent. Anyone want a fighter for it?
There's no fight here.
Just to say that I will probably be there on Friday, but I would also like to nominate MJ to be our delegate.
Yeah, I'm
Excellent.
planning on being there Friday, Saturday too, but I'm too new to step into that.
I'll second the nomination for
I think I heard a second for that nomination for Mrs.
interested.
Bryson. Are you interested? You're
I'll be
good.
happy to take it over. if no one else.
Okay. So we have a motion, we have a second. All those in favor of appointing Mrs. Burns to be our delegate? That looks like unanimous. You can vote for yourself. It's okay.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
You're welcome. And just to make note, part of Mrs. Burns' responsibilities as our delegate is to represent the Wilmington School Committee in any discussion about resolutions that may affect our district. We will be adding the resolutions, the proposed resolutions, to our agenda probably on the 10th of October. So we'll talk about that and get a sense of how we all feel about the proposed resolutions. Okay? All right, our next item is the fiscal year final revolving account report. Dr. Brand, who's going to tackle that?
That would be Mr. Ruggiero.
All right.
Thank you. You have in front of you the final FY18 revolving account report. As last school committee meeting, we talked about, we're getting ready to start the FY20 budget. We are in the midst of FY19, and we are closing FY18. So this is one piece of the FY18 budget that we're closing. So these are all our revolving accounts, and as you can see, every account is in the black. So we're in good shape in all these accounts, and these will be incorporated into our fiscal 18 end of the year report that we'll be sending to the DESC. So I just wanted to give you this, and we'll follow it up with a financial report in the next couple of meetings. So for FY18, just to close the year for good. And then we only have to deal with 2 years instead of 3.
Excellent. Dr. Brand, anything to add on the?
No,
that
I think
year?
we're in great shape. I appreciate the work. Certainly, there's a lot of work that Mr. Ruggiero pulls together for this, and it's a good news story overall. But it does show the complexity. I think it's important to note of all of the various accounts that help drive and make possible the programs and services throughout the district. So, thank you, Mr. Ruggiero, for his work on this.
Thank you.
Any questions or comments from my fellow committee members? Mr. Ragsdale?
Yeah, I have a few questions. The first one was on the CARES program for account 209. I noticed that there's I think the largest balance out of any of the accounts there of over $1 million. And I was wondering why we carry such a high balance on that particular account.
The balance is high, and talking to Sherry, the coordinator, the number of students participating has continued to increase. As far as tuition, we've increased tuition in that program one time since 2004, and that was in 2015. So it's not a matter of increased tuition driving this. We also had done a study a couple of years ago, or a year or so ago, of other communities in the pay scale and so forth, and we were significantly below a lot of the other communities. So most recently, we kind of changed the pay structure a little bit in the CARES program. I brought it to the school committee to mention that, which makes it more in line with other districts, and it helps us to keep staff versus people running to other districts and so forth. So as that gets incorporated, it'll help to drive the balance down. We should keep about $500,000 to $600,000, a few months of operating expenses at the end of the year in this account. We are a little bit high, so we're working on getting that down. The other piece is we collect tuitions for the summer program in September, in June. So within this balance, we just started that a year or so ago, so parents that want to sign their children up for the summer program, the tuition's due in June. So that gets counted as, from a date perspective, by June 30th of 18, they've paid for, from a tuition perspective, the summer program, which starts at the end of June, but for the most part, July through August. And the same with the September children who are going to signed up for CARES for the school year. The September payments due sometime in June, too. So it kind of drives it up a little bit. But that, after a couple of years, will just be a wash, really, because the next year, those earlier, the July, August, September tuitions will be at the June. So it kind of will wash a little bit on that.
I also had a question about the Chromebook account, 226. So it looked in that account that we expended a lot more than we took in revenue, and dropped the balance from $6,800 to $3,131. Was there a particular reason that happened this year? Because if that continues, then that count is going to go negative.
Yeah, no, that was, we had some donation. These are for the Chromebooks for free and reduced families that we had to, that will provide them a Chromebook at no charge or a reduced price. We had received some donations. In our operating budget, we did put some money in the technology account as well to cover any of that as well. But we think Dunkin' Donuts gave us a donation last year and so forth, so we run it through here.
And I had one more, which was that on page 2, this is in the breakdown of the food service account 202. The high school receipts were so much more than for any of the other schools. I was just really curious what the cause of that was, that the high school receipts were 801,000, which is just, an order of magnitude beyond, even the middle school, which has similar enrollment.
That's a good question. I will get that answer for you. It could be just where it got charged. The revenue, is the revenue. We're confident in that. It might have just been charged to an incorrect account, but I'll look into that to see if it should have been.
Well, they do have the salad bar,
Yeah,
which is really good.
And it is a little more expensive, but not that much more expensive than the elementary school, so I can get that answer for you.
Mrs. Bryson?
I just have 2 questions. The Global Child Program, is that all revenue?
Yes.
Okay, so we don't pay anything for, what is that?
No, they just rent the facilities to run their foreign language programs.
Do we have a sense of how many children participate in that, or does it not even really come into us at all? I'm just curious.
Yeah, I don't know offhand. We usually do a global child report at some point.
Yeah, okay. And then my other
they do
question,
some.
I'm sorry.
Okay.
My other question was just about the Facilities West charge, that 14,000. I was just wondering what that was. Page 9, sorry.
That's most likely, it's custodial costs and so forth, because I think a lot of the men's basketball and other rec department kind of use that. In the revenue, it was like 15,000 in the west as well, so.
Thank you.
Any further questions or comments from the committee? No, I think that covers the fiscal year final revolving account report. Thank you, Mr. Ruggiero.
Thank you.
Okay, next up is there is a personnel report update.
Thank you. Andrea, our HR director, put this report together. It's just a snapshot of what occurred since, I think in September, early September, we had given you a personnel report as well. So as you can see, and we're still working, we have some open positions still. We had a couple of late resignations. So we're still working to fill those, but as you can see, we have filled a lot of the other open positions that were there back in early September. I was at a conference today, and one of the items that they spoke about was how do you deal with late resignations and how it impacts the district, especially, August resignations and now you scramble and so forth. So a lot of districts are dealing with the same thing, and one of the discussion points was, do we put, for instance, individual contracts, you have 30-day, 60-day, 90-day notice. Some of our contracts may not, in other districts may not. So is that something that we need to think about going forward, that there's some, notification number of days, so even if they resign, because a lot of times they resign in the summer, they resign today. So now you scramble to try to find some. At least if you had a little bit of time, it would help you in the search process, so.
If I may just add, and just somewhat to echo what Mr. Ruggiero said, but there, I think that it's fair to say that going into a school year, there's always still some turnover in some particular categories of staffing. I know that I've seen that in many districts, and it's understandable to a point. But I think it is very important to point out, as Paul said, that we had some very late resignations right before and even right after school started. And so what I can say and what I can share is that certainly There's no one dragging their feet. I have the opportunity to see how quickly things are processed and efforts are made to try and fill a vacancy as soon as it becomes open. But the reality is that just the nature of this particular time period and this particular year, I hope, we've had just a larger number of late resignations, as Paul said. So efforts are certainly on our way to try and fill these as quickly as we can. The challenge, furthermore, is the time of the year that we're at, and is the reality that trying to attract people that may be in other positions already is not a great place to be also. To have somebody else, if they're working in a school system, then break their contract becomes very problematic as well, too. So I can appreciate the concern that there may be for the red and the open positions, but just to know that efforts are certainly underway, and we're trying to fill them as quickly as we can.
Any comments or questions? Mr. Ragsdale?
So I noticed that there are also a few terminations on this report, not just resignations. And I was wondering if you can speak to, just kind of on a general level, how often we need to terminate staff and what some of the common reasons for that would be.
They're more, it would go around a personnel matter. I mean, the termination here probably should not have stated termination. This employee did leave at the end of last school year. And I believe that, I think actually that position has been filled since this report was created. But it would come to, in the contract, you could non-renew someone within the first 3 years. A teacher, or something else happened and it becomes a personnel matter that we would have to deal with and not bring a person back or ask a person to leave. In this particular case, I think the word termination probably should have been resignation.
Mrs. Burns?
If Dr. Brand could share with us, I noticed that some of the openings are educational assistants, and one being a sign language interpreter. How are we fulfilling those positions in the interim until we can hire on a more permanent? How are our students being serviced? Because I'm sure educational assistants sometimes are required for one-on-one services or number of students per classroom. Can you just maybe share how we're managing it in the interim?
That's a great question. I can't comment specifically on the sign language interpreter, and I don't know, Alice is here tonight, and maybe, I don't mean to put her on the spot, maybe she can. But what I can comment on is the other part of your question around the assistants, and certainly I will say that there is a keen awareness across the district, my sense is, a keen awareness around these openings and efforts to try and employ the use of other staff under the umbrella, if you will, of student services or regular education services to provide the support. There's awareness of where the needs are, where students have such called out for in their education plan. And my sense is there is that awareness, and so some of it's piecemeal provision of services right now until we have a full-time person in that role. But where there is a requirement or obligation on our part to provide those services, we are doing all that we can to provide that. Alice, I don't know, again, I don't want to put you on the spot, but.
That has not left yet, so we posted it literally the day that the individual resigned. The posting was up, it's been offered, it's just a matter of getting the paperwork signed, so. Assuming there's no other HR issue.
Thank you.
We shouldn't have a gap if we were.
There's two positions that, and it may have changed.
It did change, there's one.
Okay, thank you
Yep.
very much, I appreciate the
Yep,
clarification.
and then, the worst case scenario is to trying to contract with an agency if we knew that there was gonna be a gap.
Thank you, because that would be my second question with regards, especially to the specialized piece of the psychology.
Sure.
Thank you very much.
Any other questions or comments? Okay, I think we're good on the personnel update. Okay, next up, I think we're going to hear from Ms. Peters and maybe Mr. Miranda on our process for NEASC accreditation at the high school.
Good evening, everybody. Good evening. So Wilmington High School is beginning a process for accreditation
Accreditation is actually a 10-year cycle, and our last accreditation was in 2010. And we were originally scheduled for 2020, but we've been moved to 2021 since the commission has redesigned its process and also revised its standards. So they've kind of divided up the number of schools that they had in 2020 and put some of them to 2021, and we ended up in 2021. So the process begins about 2.5 years before they actually come into the school and visit the school to accredit us. And so that means that we're beginning now. In the fall of 2018 and the winter of 2019, we are working on a self-reflection. And in doing this, we have 2 committees formed. Right now, we have a steering committee which oversees the process. Mr. Miranda is a co-chair of the steering committee, so I asked him to come tonight in case you had any questions. We have 10 members on the steering committee right now, members from each department, also from guidance and from special education. We have a 10-member self-reflection committee, also members from each department, and the self-reflection committee actually begins this work that we do this first year, and it involves gathering input from teachers, feedback, evidence, artifacts that help us to write a report that indicates how we meet each of the standards. There are 5 standards all around learning. So this is our first step. We have begun. We have a big day in November, on November 6th, where we're going to really spend the 6 hours together with the staff to kind of gather the evidence, and we'll be working with the steering committee to write the report. So the standards, there are 5 of them. Each of them has what's called a foundational element, and we reflect on the foundational element, and it is expected that we meet each of those foundational elements in order to even begin the accreditation process. So we look at the foundational elements, we evaluate ourselves on that, and then each of those foundational elements has a number of principles attached to it, and these are the principles of effective practice. And then we rate ourselves based on how we meet those principles, how we evaluate ourselves on that. This is the actual rubric that we use to rate ourselves on for each of those principles. And these are the principles that we will be working with on November 6th to gather evidence from the faculty. Usually, right after we do this self-reflection report, we do provide it to the commission, to NEASC, and they send out a group of people that will come in. I think they're coming in the early spring. I don't have a date for it yet. It's somewhere between February and May that they will come in 2019. And this is called a collaborative conference visit, during which they interview, and they also visit classrooms, and they also, this is in light of what they have read in the self-reflection report. And during the self-reflection, we also identify our areas of strength and also our areas of growth. And during the collaborative conference visit, the members that come to work with us will help us to write an improvement plan based on what they see and what our report says. So they will gather information, they will ensure that the foundational elements are in place, and then they will validate our school's priority areas for growth. We will write a school improvement plan based on that, and that's the school growth plan or the school improvement plan from that is what we implement over the next 2 years before our actual decennial visit, which will take place in March of 2010. I'm sorry, 2021. So the decennial visit team will be 6 to 8 visitors. They're here for 3 to 4 days. This process is something they've had in place for many years, so this is not a change in the process. Their focus is on observing, and it is on teaching and learning. And again, they will gather evidence, provide us with feedback and a report, And at that point, they will accredit us, and we will be required to report out after that on recommendations that they make based on that visit. And the reports are usually, they used to be 2 and 5 years, but I think they've gone to 3 and 6 years. And the faculty is included in all parts of the accreditation, but the one thing that is a little different with this process is there's no requirement for faculty to participate. It's more on a voluntary basis. The only requirement that the faculty has is that they are here on the first day of the visit, which is a Sunday in March. So the faculty will be in discussions on the alignment to the standards. They will provide evidence and feedback so that we can write the report. They will also review and approve the self-reflection report, and then they will provide input as to the areas of growth. They will implement the growth plan over 2 years, and then they will participate in the decennial and the collaborative visit. And that's it. It's a
Comments
long
or-
process, but
Yeah. Comments or questions from the committee? Mr. Ragsdale?
I'm curious, the process sounds like it's a very beneficial exercise for the school to go through. The standards seem really clearly and well thought out. Is there benefit to the accreditation itself beyond the intrinsic benefit of going through this type of exercise and receiving the feedback and thinking about it in terms of school improvement, beyond the...
I think it helps us look and move forward. I think that it helps us see what we do very well and gives us more ideas to move forward. I think we're always trying to be more and more innovative, and I think it helps us with that.
Okay, I guess I was thinking, like, are there any opportunities that are foreclosed if the school was not accredited? What kind of credential, I'm just curious what the purpose of the credential is beyond the benefit of the exercise itself.
I can't answer that, I'm not sure. It's a good question.
It's a tricky question.
Hey, that is very interesting and good question, and not one that I can easily answer either, except to say that it would not position the district well and the school well not to be accredited. Appropriate or not, this is a place that schools throughout New England certainly subscribe to be in. It's a robust process. It's an extensive process. But honestly, you use the word intrinsic, I think, there is that, but there's also, I think, a very strong extrinsic factor that emerges, and that is the process that is lengthy and very involved. It really helps, I think, a school community take stock of where it's at and moves it forward. And so it's, I don't know ultimately if a school decided to pursue that, but I do know that it would not be positioned well in terms of receipt for the accreditation aspect with colleges and universities. It may not be easy to define, and I could look into that if you wanted to, but.
I was not suggesting that we blow off the accreditation. We don't need your stupid accreditation.
Any other questions or comments? Great. Thank you very much for your time and a lot of work, I'm sure. Okay, next up, under new business, I believe we're going to hear from Ms. McDonald, who's going to share an update on our English language learners program. Thank
Now
you.
it's really called the English Learners Program.
See, I was right the
They're
first
starting
time.
they've changed it a little bit. The state has.
Public education and our acronyms.
Yes. So our ESL, our English Learner Program we've just about tested all the students that we need to test this year. We have a window of about 30 days when school starts to test students. And so we've been very busy this year, especially at the kindergarten level. So at the kindergarten level, we have tested about 24 students, and we've picked up 10 students. So they've qualified for our services. So right now, the ESL program, and it's not, we try to get all this data in also before the SIMS data is due for the state. We have about 36 students like we did in the end of the last year. What's interesting is last year, we exited out 12 students, and we had about 5 students, families leave the district. But we've tested so many new students in that we're just about at the same level right now, and I can only see it increasing right now. The plan that we have set up is based on what DESE requires, the English. It's still called by the English language learner, but it is really English learner plan. You know, and that provides rules as to how do we identify students, how do we place students, how do we service students, and how do they exit our program. We have, with all these students, I just brought in, I have a slide to show you, these are the languages right now with our current students. So as you can see, this is still a variety of languages, where Spanish is the most popular one, but it's only 8 families. And then when we combine those families, the languages of the families who we've exited, we have even more languages. And I have to tell you, during the kindergarten screening, so what we've been doing, the ESL staff and I, in June, is we've been participating in the kindergarten screening and trying to find out from the home language survey what other languages are spoken at home. So we meet with the children, and we do an initial screening just to get an idea if we need to do a full screening in the fall. And it was amazing, all the different languages that I don't even have up here because the students didn't qualify. And I'm also part of a conversation group, which I've been doing for a while pretty much on my own. But this year I'm working with the library, so I'm actually in the little brochure. And we had our first meeting this week, last Thursday. It's the 3rd Thursday of each month. And I had 4 families come, so it was really good because sometimes I've had nobody show up. So one of the families is, they speak Bulgarian. And she said there's 4 or 5 other families in Wilmington, so they have their own little community. And she's coming to the group because they only speak Bulgarian at home. The 2 daughters are doing really well in our program. It's their 2nd year, so I think they're in 1st grade and 3rd grade. So they scored quite high on their last year's test, so they're getting a really great education through our schools, but they're still maintaining their Bulgarian language. So it is amazing how many languages are spoken at home in our community. And this is a true testament to the strength of bilingualism, too. It's really important. You know, it's just a great thing that just because you speak another language doesn't mean you need to have ESL services or there's anything going to hold you back from, you know, doing well in school. So does anyone have any questions? Yeah.
Mrs. Burns, I saw your hand first.
I have to say, I'm amazed at some of the languages that I have never have heard before. Because I can't wait to Google the last 2 by Ms. Bjork's head.
So Tagalog is Filipino.
Okay.
She's from the Philippines, the family. And then Kinyarwanda is a language spoken in mostly Kenya.
Okay.
But, you know, we had a student last year who actually left, sister and brother, and they were our SLIFE family. So we had one family that had limited and interrupted formal education, and Kinyarwanda is what they put down, but they also spoke many different languages because they moved around different countries in Africa, and there's so many languages that they can speak. But that's mostly in Kenya.
Thank you.
And I would not have known that if I did not meet them. It's not something that I had ever come up with either, I've come across either. Malayalam is an Indian language. I think the other ones are, you know, and it's interesting because many of these don't have an alphabet like ours. So it's just a testament to the students and the families' work on helping them do so well in school. And I don't speak any of those languages, so, yeah.
Mr. Bjork.
I would just say that, you know, this is very enlightening. I don't think, Wilmington historically is not thought of as a very diverse community. And this is really enlightening. And it's great to know that we've got this kind of diversity in
do.
town.
We do, it is. We have a lot of Albanian speakers. What other languages? There was French. I'm trying to think of the kindergarten screening. And the students did wonderful. I mean, it was just, the English was great, but it was just wonderful to see that these languages were still being used at home. And, it was very cool.
Any other questions, Mr. Ragsdale?
Can you tell us what the average length of time is that a student receives English language services in our program? How quickly are we transitioning them out?
Most students, especially if they're younger, are with us about 3 years. 3 years. If they're older, I just had a student that we exited out this year. She's a junior this year, but she's been here since 6th grade. So the older, it's a little bit more difficult. There's more transition issues. But with the younger ones, so far, it looks about that. It also depends on their education, their formal education. 3 to 4 years. Anything over 6 years is considered a long-term L student, so someone who's has some other struggles we have to try to address and try to help them along, because that means they've kind of been stuck in the program. There's something, they're making progress, but not enough. It also hasn't helped that the assessment that we use, the access test, has changed. The last 2 years, it changed. So it is, not that it's more difficult, but scoring has changed. They've had to change the cut scores on how they were, when we can exit students. So that has made some kids stay in the program a little longer because they didn't quite make this current score. But mostly about 3 to 4 years.
Okay, and for students who are older, like it looks like in the middle school and the high school that we typically have, like 4 or 5 students, are those students who have, come to Wilmington late, like how long have those older students typically been with us in the
So
in
this
the
year,
program?
we have a student from Vietnam she's just from Vietnam at the high school. So that's the only active student right now I have. The other 3 are former ones. At the middle school, they were born here, and they were in ESL programs in Malden, and they just haven't qualified to get out. So they're new to me, so I have to work to see what it is that they've been in the program this long. We have one girl actually who's from Kuwait, but she was born here, and then they moved back to Kuwait for 4 years, and now she's back here again. And they're new students, so I'm still getting to know more about their background.
Okay, but it sounds like for the most part that students are succeeding in the program and developing the
Yes,
English skills that they need to transition out.
Yes, part of the CPR was to see if our students were making progress, and we were. Our students did make progress, so that was not anything we were cited on. So I was very proud of that because it's, we're mostly a pull-out program. I'm a class at the middle school and high school, but the elementary level, we pull them out of class. So sometimes it's hard to really sense, how they're doing in the classroom. It's themselves. So it was good to see that they've been making progress with their English acquisition.
Thank you. Any other? Mrs. Bryson?
The students, so they're pulled out for the special program and then included in, would it be a regular classroom setting with an SEI endorsed teacher? So would their
Yes.
classroom teacher would be SEI endorsed?
Yes, and that's one of the things that we're working on, and we have almost all the teachers trained by next year. That's the goal. Yes, they're with SEI endorsed teachers, so that they continue to get support with the strategies the teachers have learned that work for all their students, but really are needed for L students. Absolutely.
And you're trying to get to 100%?
Yeah, I
The
think.
whole district for next year?
The whole district for core academic.
Okay.
Okay, because that's a requirement. I mean, I'd love to have everyone trained, the art teachers and the phys ed, but right now, core academic is what DESI's going to start tracking us with, too. With this new look bill that was signed in, part of the regulation is going to be, DESI's going to be sending Dr. Brand a report that says, these are teachers who, these are students, and these have to be matched up with SEI endorsed teachers. Have you done that? And then you're going to ask me, and I'm going to tell you.
Ms. McDonald, you use the term SEI, but just for the audience at home and the community, could you just explain briefly a little bit about what that is and what that really means as it relates to our
Absolutely.
teaching staff?
And I was just doing this last night in the SEI class. Okay, so SEI stands for Sheltered English Immersion. And so what that is, it's a program where is the two components. It's the ESL teacher, and it's also the classroom teacher. And the classroom teacher is teaching sheltered content instruction, SCI. But the two together provide the supports for the English learner. So sheltered English immersion is the program that we actually use in the district, and that means a combination of ESL teacher and a teacher who has been trained to understand the aspects of language acquisition, to understand the level of proficiency and what students can do, what supports they need.
And Ms. McDonald mentioned the goal, the requirement to be at 100%, but as it relates to the numbers of our students, and as that number rises, there has to be a thoughtfulness for where they're placed in classrooms throughout the district. So there's certainly, there are lots of ramifications, if you will, in terms of what this means for practice. So.
Absolutely, and we do work with, I myself work with the principals to make sure when we get the access scores, which are in usually May, at that point, they're already talking about placement for students. So I just make sure that they have, these are the students that we're going to still have in our program. And also now, one of the newer requirements with the ESA is that we have to follow students for 4 years after they leave the ESL program. And that means placing them in SEI-endorsed teacher classrooms the best we can. So I do work with the principals on that. And one of the other things I've been doing is with our HR department, I've made sure that all new hires, or anytime a job is posted, the SEI endorsement is on there. So we're getting, and I think it's getting pretty standard now for teaching that you need to have the endorsement. I think all new teachers, the past couple of years have been coming out with the endorsement. So we want to make sure.
Mr. Ragsdale.
And just, can you give just a small amount more detail about what what sheltered content means and what differentiates it from just pure language acquisition instruction?
So sheltered content would actually be in the classroom, there'd be various components of the lesson that would be looked over, such as vocabulary. So making sure that the vocabulary is tiered appropriately, which means the teacher would take a look and say, okay, these are the 10 words that I know my student has to, in fact, my L student, all my students, but my L student, going to need specific instruction on because they may have multiple meanings to them. There could be words that aren't clearly, they're used on a regular basis. They could be idiomatic expressions. So the teacher has to look at the content and take a look and see what additional support in that lesson needs to be done. Also, the sheltered content would be to provide certain strategies. So there are certain ones that work in certain environments, certain types of situations. So it requires the teacher to really do a lot of previewing of the lesson. But vocabulary is one of the major components of that. Now, my side with the English development is to work on a lot of stuff, a lot of stuff. We do vocabulary too, but our lessons are, we have a curriculum. I mean, there's content in social studies, there's science content involved also. But we can focus just on the language, where they have to still teach the whole content and be aware of the language being used, and then provide the strategies for that. But first part would be to take a look at the vocabulary, and that's one of the biggest areas we spend on the course, in the course.
Any other comments or questions? Thank you very much for your update. It's always interesting. Okay, I believe that we are going to get an update from Ms. Hill on her plans for the Special Olympics. Thank you.
Hi. All right, so I put a little PowerPoint together for you just to sort of guide us through the past 2 years of the school day games. You know, it started in 2017. Last year was our second annual, and tonight I'm going to propose a date for your approval for our third annual Wilmington Unified School Day Games. And so I figured I'd start out with the participants. In 2017, we had a total of 160 students who were on the field. They were athletes and partners. Let's see, I have the actual numbers in front of me. Wilmington Public Schools had 123 students. Burlington Public Schools brought 35 students, and we had 2 out-of-district students for a total of 160. In 2018, we had an increase in numbers. Wilmington had 139. Burlington had 84. We had 6 out-of-district students and a total of 229 students. So I thought the bar graph would kind of show you how much those numbers jumped. I don't anticipate the numbers are really going to change too much for Wilmington and Burlington. We've kind of nailed down the way that we're inviting students to the Special Olympics. So if they are in a sub-separate classroom, we're giving them the option to participate as an athlete, participate as a partner, or to not participate at all. So if they're in a sub-separate classroom, they get an invitation. From there, anyone who's going to be an athlete then can pick a partner or have help being partnered up with somebody else who's going to participate with them in the event. Out-of-district students will be invited as long as their school does not have their own school day games that they participate in. And hopefully we'll clean up that process better this year than last year. It was a little rough, but we got through it. So we may have an increase in out-of-district students if we communicate that one a little bit better, but otherwise I think the numbers will stay pretty much the same. I know last year we did try to invite Billerica and Tewksbury. They were content with the school day games that they participated in. We may reach out to other districts. We'll talk about that at our first committee meeting. But the number we had, I felt like 200 was a good workable number. So I don't know if we really want to go much bigger than that. It's nice and not too out of control. We have the volunteers who can manage those numbers of kids, and it makes for a nice day. So in 2017, we raised just over $6,000 from a few community members and businesses. We just happened to get a huge donation from TJ Maxx, which really helped us to get that first event off the ground. They did send some volunteers to help with the award station. They came back last year, and they intend to come back in all the following years. We did also have a penny drive at the high school to raise that money. And last year, we raised almost $7,000 we had a huge increase in people who were donating. One that I did want to mention was Connolly Printing. They donated all of the T-shirts. They donated signs, banners that were in the stadium. They made beautiful programs that were full color, and they did not ask for a cent from us. We did offer faculty T-shirts, that faculty could buy T-shirts. The money that I gave back to them, they said they were just going to donate right to the Special Olympics. So they did not make anything off of this, and they really provided quite a lot for us. We're One Wilmington is another one that donated a lot. They funded the Olympic Town, where we get a big tent, we have a DJ, a photo booth, some games for the kids. That's the station that's sort of down, so they're moving around all day. That's the spot where they can kind of just relax, have fun, get a snack if they need it. And we had a few other people who donated things. We had WB Mason, Pepsi, and why am I blanking on it? There was another one who gave us water. WB Mason, Pepsi, and who else gives water? Poland Spring, that would be the one. So they gave us a whole bunch of water. We ran out of water and had to go get some more. The Rotary Club offered to provide food, but because of allergies, we have not been providing food to the athletes, although we're thinking we're going to pursue having them provide food that spectators could go and buy during the day. But we, unless we can work something out, we're still going to have athletes and partners bring their own lunches on that day. Now, on top of all those donations, we had a Community Savers Fund Drive, and the Shawshene School had a hat drive. And so that funds the day. Any money that we don't spend on the event goes directly to the Special Olympics. So these individuals made donations right to the Special Olympics. We get reimbursed from them for the items that we have to pay for. Here are some pictures of our volunteers. The day would not happen without them. Every year we've had about 100 student volunteers. Most of them come from the Mentor Club, NHS, and any other students who are interested in helping out for the day. And they are the first ones on the field in the morning. They get there at about 7 a.m. to set up the stations. They're the last ones on the field to help clean up. And they do everything in between. They run the stations, they cheer the athletes on. They're just there all day long. And we had about 10 adult community volunteers on the first year. We had about 20 last year. And we like to allow people to help out. So if people reach out, we find a spot for them, and we get them out there. And I know we like pictures, so here are highlights. I put some of my favorites in from the first year, but most of them are from last year. You can see some of the different events. I know that first torch run was pretty epic. And there's some more pictures from this year. Lots of smiles on the faces. So our proposed date would be Wednesday, May 1st, 2019, with a rain date of May 2nd. That falls on the same week that we had the Special Olympics last year. It's the second week after we get back from April vacation. And we've checked with the Special Olympics. That's a date that's open on their calendar, so we can snag it up if it's available for Wilmington. Currently, I did not see anything on the high school calendar. Talked to Ms. Peters, and she said, "Let's move forward. let's snag it now while there's nothing else there." And one other thing that I wanted to mention for communication purposes, we do have our own email address now, special.olympics@wpsk12.com. We're going to have a few devoted members of the committee checking that regularly, just to reply to anyone who has questions, people who want to donate, people who want to volunteer, the liaisons in the school. I know last year I had a teacher at each school who I communicated with. I haven't decided yet if I'm just going to keep that for them to contact me at my address, or if I'll have them contact this one. We'll see what works best. But that way we can keep all the emails in one place. So thank you. I sincerely appreciate your support of this event, and we look forward to seeing you, all of you, on the field next year at the 3rd Annual Wilmington Unified School Day Games.
Questions or comments from the committee members? No. Thank you very much for your
thank you.
presentation and also your work. And I think that brings us through our new business items that were planned for this evening. Any public comment? No public comment. Oh, okay. All right, next up would be subcommittee reports, and I know that we have the auditorium naming subcommittee is one of the reports we're looking forward to hearing from. Mrs. Burns or Mr. Bjork, would you like to speak to that?
MJ, by all means.
Well, we met 2 weeks ago. We have an upcoming meeting on Monday. Things are moving along. We've kind of run into a couple of snafus. We're still working on a date. But we've been discussing signage for the auditorium, which is coming along. And once we find a date, that should be complete. I think we have a good idea as to what we're going to do. We're still waiting on Mrs. Meddy still kind of firming up the itinerary for performances, which is going to be wonderful. So we're still a work in progress. Steve, please feel free to add.
I think you've encapsulated it very nicely. I would just say that we'll certainly be sending out invitations to people who've been involved and knew Joanne, but we also recognize that we're going to miss some people, so we're going to try to make the announcements as public as possible so that everyone can attend.
Any other subcommittee reports this evening? Mrs. Burns?
I'll just touch upon, the Wellness Advisory Committee met for the first time this afternoon for the upcoming year. Again, it's one of the, I'm so happy to participate at this because the enthusiasm that Mrs. Stinson and Mrs. Crow bring to the group, and thought-provoking goals as to what the Wellness Advisory can focus on for the upcoming year. Mrs. Stinson has come up with a district-wide, a thought plan that we're just trying to formulate today. We started formulating today about a district-wide wellness activity committee for the district. So where we're hoping to generate one big calendar that we can try to pull in good practices within the classroom. The teachers may have 5 minutes to, you know, for instance, if I can explain it, because it's still in a rudimentary place right now, but where teachers might take 2 minutes from teaching to have all students stand up and do some mindfulness exercise, just to rejuvenate and to be able to refocus on, bless you, on lessons. Just thinking of ways of how we can reach out to the classrooms and parents with, you know, wellness tips that they could do at home or within the classroom. Mrs. Crow also shared a newsletter that is going out to guardians and parents, which I have a copy here somewhere in my paperwork, which is a nuance, which is an absolutely interesting and wonderful way to communicate certain upcoming things such as flu, and, you know, how to be mindful of washing hands and things of that sort, as well as upcoming, I know I have it, I put it away right before the meeting, but it started off as very strongly this afternoon, and I look forward to our next meeting in November.
Any other subcommittees met since our last? No? Okay.
Julie, I just have
Sure.
one thing that I just thought is an event coming up next Tuesday that is worth reminding parents about, that this Office of Student Support Services have put together, is their anxiety workshop. That's going to be a 2-session workshop, and the first one is next Tuesday here at the high school in this room, and it starts at 9 o'clock. And I know this affects a great number of students in the district, so it's worth reminding everybody that this is happening.
Great, thank you for that. Okay. Any other correspondence this evening?
No correspondence.
No correspondence, okay, thank you, Mrs. Burns. All right, and with that, I think we've arrived at our last agenda item, which is adjournment. Can I ask for a motion to adjourn, please?
To adjourn?
Mr. Ragsdale, seconded by Mrs. Bryson. All those in favor? That looks like unanimous, Tristan. Thank you very much.